Thread snapping, it's so frustrating, isn't it? I know, I hear you. Now in this video, I have got 7 reasons why your thread is likely to be snapping in your machine. Shall I take a breath there? And I've given you solutions to each of those. I've started off with the most likely reason and the solutions, and as we get through the video, I've got to the less likely ones, but it's worth watching all the way through because if you've solved it to begin with, it may happen again for a different reason. So who am I? I am Kim. This is a Quilt with Kim. You, my lovely, are very, very welcome. Let's find out what the very first and most likely reason is for your thread to be snapping in your machine. Now, the first thing I want you to check is your needles, because there are 2 or 3 reasons why this could cause your thread to break. So let's work through those. Firstly, have you got the correct size of needle? Now, these 2 packets look the same. They are in fact different sizes. So if I hold them up, you'll see this one is a 75/11. This one here, even though it looks the same packet, is actually a 90/14. So the 90 is a bigger needle than the 75. What does that mean? I've done a whole video on that, so I'll link that up down below so you can go and watch. But if your thread is too big for the needle size, it will break. So for instance, if I am using a thick quilting thread here, and I'm using that through perhaps a 75/11 needle. I was going to say 75 degrees then. I don't know what planet I'm on. If I was using the smaller needle or just a standard needle size, the eye of this needle is too small for this thread to go through, so it will snap. So if you just imagine you're trying to thread this through or pull this through a very small eye of the needle, it will break because it will get caught on the needle. So first reason is, or the first solution is, up your needle size. Go up to an 80 or a 90, just depending on what size you are using. The second thing that you want to be looking at your needle is it inserted correctly? Again, I've done some videos on this, so I'll try and pop all the videos I mentioned down in the description just down below, but make sure that your needle is inserted right up to the top of the housing, in the little housing that it goes into, but has it got the flat of the needle towards the back? So when you insert it, you really want, so I can't see, hold on. You really want the flat of that needle facing the back of your machine, and then this rounded bit faces the front. So check it is inserted correctly and check that it is right up to the top of the housing, and check that you've tightened the screw up. And then the third reason, or third thing that you need to look for with your needle is it blunt? Is it bent? Now, you may not be able to tell whether it's blunt. This is actually a blunt needle. I've got it out of my recycling box to show you, but you can't tell whether it's blunt or not, of course not. But have you had your needle in for some time? Because needles do go blunt. There's plenty of photos all over the internet of microscopic photos of needles when they've been used for a little while, and the tip here really goes quite blunt and it sort of spreads out a bit, and that can cause your thread to snap. It also might be bent a little bit. This one isn't, but it might be bent a little bit, and sometimes you can see it, sometimes you can't. So if in doubt, change your needle. And actually you should be changing your needle every 8 hours anyway, 8 hours of sewing or at the start of a new project, whichever comes sooner. I know we can't time it exactly, but just give a rough variation, but about every 8 hours you should be changing your needle. So there's 3 things that we should be looking for with our needles. Is it the correct size for the thread that we are using? Is it inserted correctly? And is it an old needle? Is it damaged in some way, whether it's blunt or bent? Okay, so that's your needle. So let's move on to the next reason then. The next thing that could cause your thread to snap is the thread itself. And there's really a couple of reasons why this might happen. First of all, is it a good quality thread? Now, I've got a metal here, and I've got a very old thread that kicks around in my sewing basket. I only use it for basting or tacking. I don't use it for anything else because when I baste or tack, that thread comes out. But let's have a look at the difference between them, because poor quality thread is quite weak, and it has fluff on it, and fluff builds up in our machine. That can cause snapping in its own for its own reasons. I'll come on to that in a little bit. But because it's weak, it can actually snap when it's going through your machine, but we don't want it going through our machine. So let's have a look at this. If you look at this close up, you can see that this is, let's just compare it against the orange thread for a second. You can see that the orange metal thread is really tightly wound together and it looks quality. But when we compare it to this white thread, can you see that it's a little bit fluffy? We can see little bits of fluff coming off there, but we can see like it's a looser weave. That's not quite the right word, but it's wound on a bit more loosely. That makes it a little bit weaker, and it's not very good quality cottons or polyesters that they use in the poor quality thread. So let me just show you, if I do this little test, and this is a really good way of finding out how good a quality your thread is to snap it. So if we wind it round our fingers and then pull. So if this is a poor quality thread, it will snap pretty easily. If it is a good quality thread, it would take quite a lot of effort to snap. So let's see what happens here. If I just pull apart, that snaps with pretty much no effort. And if I look at my fingers, you can't see any imprint of the thread on my hands. Let's try that against the orange thread and see what happens. So wind it around my fingers again, and if I snap. Now this is a cotton thread, right, you can see how difficult that was to snap. Now a cotton thread will snap, but you can see that there is more effort there. A polyester would take even longer to try and snap apart. So check your threads. If it comes apart really easily, if it snaps really easily like this one with pretty much no effort, then I would ditch those threads because they are poor quality. All those little spools of thread that you get in gift boxes and those kind of things that are on little paper rolls, ditch those. They aren't very good for your machine. What you want is one of the big brands like Mettler or Gutermann or Orifil, or one of the really good brands, and that will see you fine. And that's whether you are dealing with cotton thread or polyester thread, depending on what you're stitching. Now, the other reason is the age of the thread, and that can mean a couple of things, because thread starts to degrade after about 3-ish years. It can last longer, but it really depends how you are keeping it. And how are you keeping it? If you're keeping it on one of those little thread stands with all the little poles, pokey things that you put your threads on, and you've got it on the wall opposite the window and it's all very lovely, that'll start to degrade, because thread degrades in sunlight with all the UV rays, it degrades in heat, and it degrades in humidity. So any of those things that are out of kilter with your thread, and your thread will start to sulk and it will start to break down, or the fibers will start to break down and weaken. Now you can't see that happening, but it will lead on to the thread snapping in your machine. So it really depends how you're keeping your thread. If you're keeping your thread in a cool, dark place. Now, a little tip, I get the big boxes of chocolates that you get at Christmas. And of course you have to eat the chocolates. I'm giving you full permission because this is about sewing. Eat the chocolates, and then the tins are really good for keeping your threads in because it keeps them at a stable temperature, and it's obviously a dark place, they're out of the sunlight. So that's a good place to keep threads, and if they're kept in a cool dark place, they can probably last a bit longer. Ditch the old threads. Use a new thread, make sure it is good quality brand, and keep it in a cool dark place, and it will look after you. So that is your thread. What's next on our list then? And we are still on thread for this next one. And there is another reason. So your thread might be brand new and it might be really good quality, but if it's got any knots in it or it's caught up in itself, so when it's on the spool holder and it's sort of looped around itself and got caught, that'll snap your thread as the machine gets under pressure and pulls against it and it's got stuck. So we don't want that happening. And if you've got little knots in your thread that have inadvertently got there and they're going through your machine, that'll get caught up somewhere and that'll cause your thread to snap. So check that the the thread is running loosely and freely, and it is free of knots, it's not caught up on itself or anything like that, because that can cause all manner of problems, even if it is a high quality thread. Okay, so that's thread over and done with. Let's get on to the next reason then. Your machine threaded up incorrectly. Now, there's a couple of points on your machine that can cause your thread to snap. So let's have a look at those. First up is your take up lever. That's this little bit in here, which I always like to refer to as a giraffe head, because I think it looks like that. And why can't we call it that? Anyway, its official name is the thread take up lever, and we want to make sure that our thread is properly threaded through that. How do we do that? We need to make sure that our needle is in the uppermost position when we thread, and that'll make sure that that is in the uppermost position. How do we do that? Right, there's two ways we can do it. First of all, if you've got a machine that has a needle up, needle down button, just press that and it will make the needle go down, and press it again, your needle will go up, and that'll put that in its uppermost position. The second thing is with the hand wheel. So let me just move this machine around so you can see. Okay, can you see here on the hand wheel on the right, there is a little notch that is just lining up to that center position, where very conveniently there is a sort of, is it a seam when two things are joined together? I have no idea, but where the join is on the machine, you can see that that is at the 12 o'clock position. Even if you haven't got a little handy join where the casing joins, you want a little notch or the top of your hand wheel at the 12 o'clock position. If you haven't got that at all and you've got a machine that hasn't got any markings, it is worth having a little fiddle and moving this around. Remember, this always moves towards you. It doesn't ever move that way. It can move that way, but you always want to make sure your hand wheel turns towards you. But if you have a little fiddle with it, you can make sure that your needle and your take up lever are in the uppermost position. You can look at it and you can tell by just moving this hand wheel a little bit. I can't show you on this because it's hidden, but if you move this a little bit and you can see your take up lever, you can judge where the uppermost position is, and then perhaps put a little Sharpie marker on there to show you where the top is. Okay, so we want to make sure that our needle is in the uppermost position, which makes the take up lever in the uppermost position, and that'll mean it threads properly. So let me put this machine back. The other thing is, even if your take up lever is in the uppermost position, sometimes when we've been sewing a while, we can thread the machine a little bit too fast and it can just not catch in there. So really make sure that when you're threading the machine, you go slowly and you stroke that thread to the right hand side of this little gap, around the top, and then the left hand side of this little gap. And if you do that, that thread will thread through the take up lever properly, and it will be in the right place. Now, the second thing which you may not have thought about is making sure your presser foot is in the right position. So the presser foot is this bit here, and we want to make sure that this is in the uppermost position. It is tempting to have your presser foot down. Maybe you've been traveling around and you've got your presser foot down. If you are traveling around with your presser foot down, please put a piece of fabric or even a piece of paper underneath, because this is a little tip which shouldn't be in this video, but never mind. When you're traveling around, especially in the car, things can work loose. So if your needle works loose, it can fall down underneath your base plate, and you really don't want that to happen. So if you're going to classes, then just pop a piece of fabric underneath that presser foot. Any piece of fabric will do, even an old envelope, even an old piece of paper, just to stop your needle falling down the gap. We don't want that to happen. So it is very easy to be traveling around, you've got your presser foot down, and then we go to thread the machine. The trouble is, when we put, well, it's not a trouble, this is what the machine is supposed to do. When we put the presser foot down, it closes your tension discs. And that is supposed to happen because then that keeps the thread at the right tension for when we're sewing. We absolutely want that to happen, but we don't want it to happen when we're threading the machine. We want those tension discs to be open. So if you lift up your presser foot, that'll open those tension discs, and then when you're threading the machine, you can make sure that as you're threading it and going around all the wibbly wobbly bits that we do when we thread the machine, it'll slide in those tension discs and you shouldn't have a problem. But that's probably a reason that you may not have thought about, and it's very easy to not think about it and not realize what's happening in your machine. So just make sure that your presser foot is up when you thread your machine, and that should help. Okay, let's move on to the next reason then, which is still about threading, but this time it could be your bobbin is incorrectly threaded. Now, what do I mean by that? It's very common for beginners especially to pop their bobbin in, but have it so that the bobbin thread is coming out. I can't actually see what I'm doing. It's coming out from left to right, like that, and they pop it in their machine, or they pop it in the little the case if you've got a side loading machine, and the thread comes out that way. That is incorrect. What you want is your thread to come out of your bobbin from right to left. Okay, and then we thread the machine. I'm not going to go into all of that here because I've got a couple of videos that I'll link down below on how to thread your or how to put your bobbin in the machine, whether you've got a top loading bobbin or a side loading bobbin. So just click the one that's relevant to your machine. So the top is just where you can see it on the top of your machine underneath your needle. The side loading is where you have to take the little case off the side and you'll see it in there. You can also have little loops and tucks and knots in your bobbin. Very easy to do, so make sure that you don't have your thread caught up because that'll cause thread to snap. And the other thing is, you know, sometimes when you wind your thread, you end up with a really messy bobbin. That's caused by an incorrect tension. I'm not going into that here, but I have got a video when you've got a really messy bobbin. Do not put that in your machine under any circumstances. Get it wound onto a new bobbin. Make sure that the tension of the thread on the bobbin is correct. So I'll link that thread up. I will link that video up below so you can see what to do about that. There's a very easy way to sort out the thread, but you don't want any messy bobbins, or mossy bobbins even, messy bobbins in your machine, because that can cause your thread to snap too. Okay, what's next on our list then? Next up could be a build-up of lint or fluff or little bits of thread caught underneath your base plate. What does that mean? This is your base plate here, and if I look underneath here, I have just taken the screws out, by the way, because it takes too long and it's too fiddly to do on camera. So if I take that off, and if we have a look under here, now this is actually quite clean, surprisingly so. I did clean it out recently, to be fair. Now, you could have the smallest little tiniest bit of thread caught up under here, and it will cause all manner of problems on your machine. So clean underneath your base plate on a regular basis and you can stop any lint build up. However, it doesn't take much for something dodgy to be going on, or it's snipped the threads, or just something's got caught, and you can have, as I said, a tiny little bit of fluff or lint, and that can cause problems with your machine and cause the thread to snap. So if your thread is snapping and you've checked the other things, it's worth having a look underneath your base plate and seeing what's going on down here. Now, don't be scared underneath here. You do need to be checking underneath here and cleaning it out regularly, as I said. Again, I've got a video just down below that you can watch to find out how to clean your machine, including a little tool that you may have in your house already, which will make cleaning out your machine very easy. That's lint and fluff. What's next then? And that would be your upper thread tension. Now, people fiddle with that upper thread tension. Generally, you do not need to touch this at all. What is your tension? It's this wheel here where you've got some numbers on it, and generally they have the correct tension for your machine is marked somehow. On this machine, you can see there's a little line from the 5 to the 4, there's another little line from the 3 to the 4. That tells me that in this machine, the correct tension is 4. To be fair, for most machines, the correct tension is 4, but it could be different on your machine. Some machines have the standard tension, the default tension in a little square, or in a little round circle, or it's marked different in some way. So what we need to make sure is that it is in the right place, because if your thread tension is too tight, then that can make that top thread pull and it'll snap. So we really want to make sure that our thread tension is set in the correct place. Okay, now the next reason, I bet you can't guess what this is. It could be that you are starting to sew too fast. Now, when we get our fabric underneath the machine, it is really easy to just hit the foot pedal down and off we go at 100 miles an hour. Don't do that to your machine. Just slow the pace down a bit. We want to do a couple of things when we are starting to sew. We want to put our fabric in position, we want to put our presser foot down, then we put our needle into the fabric before we do anything else. We hold our little tail threads at the back and then we start sewing, but we start slowly and then we build up speed, and that just lets your machine get going. If you think about when you're driving, what you wouldn't do is come out of your driveway and put your foot down and tear off at 100 miles an hour. To be fair, my son probably would, but he's in his early 20s. Let's ignore him for a minute. You wouldn't do that. You really need to go slow and you build up speed. It's the same with your sewing machine. You start just a slower speed and you build up your speed, and that'll just help make sure that everything is running smoothly through your machine. Okay, there is a final reason which I'm going to cover, but I don't want you to worry about it too much. You may have seen that your timing out on the machine could cause your thread to snap. It could. It's not very likely that that is what's happening. I've gone through these in order of the things to check. But if all the other solutions don't work, then it's possibly your timing is out on the machine. That is a whole other video, but what timing means is when your needle comes down and there is a little hook underneath that has to catch the thread, and those two timing pieces are out. There are videos online that you can go and find out to see how that works. But if those two things aren't working in the right time, then it can cause your thread to snap. And if you've got to that stage, then you probably want to go and see a proper sewing machine engineer. But it is very unlikely to be your timing. It is more likely to be all the other reasons that I have covered before now. So I do hope that has helped to help you find the reason why your thread might be snapping. And if it has helped, please don't forget to like, subscribe and hit that notification bell. I would love you and leave you for now, and I will look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.